Hello, it's March 24th, 2022, and this is the Backdrop Weekly Developer Meeting. We get together every week to talk about the latest in core development. We cover any issues that have been raised by the community in the past week, and we talk about prioritized issues. Before we get started, we'll do introductions of everybody who's here in the meeting. My name is Nate Lampton from Oakland, California. I go by Quick Sketch on the internet. And let's go to Robert and then Jen.
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet in Altadena, California.
Thanks, Robert. Jen and then Tim.
I'm Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California. That's it for me.
All right, Tim and
Hi,
then Justin.
Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim, and I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. And turkey just came back to visit. I haven't seen a wild turkey in about a week. Big news. Go ahead, Justin.
Thanks, Tim. Justin and then Wilbur.
Justin Christopherson in Denver, Colorado.
All right, Wilbur, and then finally Peter, if you're available.
Wilbur Ince in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I had a turkey walk by my window this morning.
The turkey competition is tough in this call. Let's see. And Peter, if you're available, do you want to do an intro?
Yep, Peter Anderson, BW Panda from Australia.
Thanks, Peter. All right. Jen, you want to give us the contributed project update?
Sure. So since our last weekly meeting, we've had 3 new contributed modules released. The administration menu source module, the C file fetcher module. I don't know what CA files are, but oh, certificate files. Interesting. And tweet feed. And tweet feed was ported by the Drupal maintainer. So that's pretty exciting.
All right, excellent. All right, so every week we have a forum post shared from forum.backdropcms.org that solicits topics for discussion. This week, I should have manually checked that. I'm not totally sure if there's anything in there. I didn't think there was.
I think there was one issue, but it was a design issue.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, but we did have some other topics that have been brought up at the start of the meeting. I'm going to share my screen because this first one is hard to comprehend. Let's see. Let's share. Okay, here we go. All right, so the first issue that we've got here is 5563. That this has to do with both update module and installer and project browser. So the general problem that we have here, actually, Jen, maybe you could summarize it. I think you're better prepared.
Sure. So this issue actually came in through an email in the contact form from Backdrop CMS from one of our users who has been helping us with accessibility reports on a bunch of stuff in Backdrop for a long time. So because he's a pretty good contributor and submitted this request, I immediately went to look at it and was able to reproduce the problem. Where we have this scenario right now where the latest version of rules got an update where it changed the version of the entity tokens module that it depended on. And the entity tokens module at the time of the issue had 2 supported releases, a 1.1.0 and a 2.0.0 release or something. So they have 2 major versions that were supported, 2.0.1 now, I guess. And at the time they were both supported. And so Backdrop's installer would be like, well, there's 2 versions for you to choose from, but they're both supported. And so we're not automatically going to update you from the 1 version to the 2 version because maybe you're not ready to make that change. But because the rules module depended on the 2 version now, and Backdrop wouldn't update from 1 to 2 on the dependency module, rules wouldn't update. So the person was trying to use the installer module to update rules, and it got stuck in this situation. So initially I was like, oh, this must be a problem with Backdrop Core because it can't handle the updates properly. And then everyone did a bunch of research and realized, oh, no. This is a supported scenario, right? We allow you to have two versions of a module supported at any given time. And we don't want to automatically update someone from version 1 to version 2 if they're not ready. So what we need to do is fix this situation in Contrib, where if we mark the version 1 branch of entity token is unsupported, then Backdrop will update you to the supported version and everything's fine. So they found a solution right now, so the issue is no longer urgent. But it occurred to me that this is still going to be a problem if, for example, the rules module were to have a security update come out next month, and the entity token module did still want to have a new version and an old version, new version in testing, an old version not, we would now have a situation where people who are relying on the installer module to handle their updates, or in the future, the automatic update system or whatever, wouldn't be able to get that security update because the project it's dependent on wouldn't update, which means that project itself wouldn't update. So it seems to me like there's still an issue here, even though we did find an immediate solution. And I don't know what the right solution is for this in core, like a checkbox somewhere that says, like, I understand the risks, update me to the dev version of 2.x or whatever it is. But I do think that we're sort of boxing, without a solution in the user interface, we're boxing in these people who don't have access to their code to not be able to get security updates in the future. So I thought it was worth discussing today. Nate, if you're talking, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks for the summary, Jen. I think the current behavior of staying within the major version seems desirable. Like, I think that's what we would normally want. But moving up to a major version is also like, that's a tricky thing. And once we move into like automatic updating, we won't really get the opportunity to like prompt the user for the question of like, do you want to do this major update? I don't know. It's kind of sounding to me like this should possibly be a question, like in installer or update module about preferred versions, like, stay within minor versions, or stay within major versions, or upgrade to the latest major versions. And if you chose to stay within a major version, your site would just get locked. I mean, it would get stuck if another module had a dependency and could no longer update because it couldn't update a major version of something else.
We have two qualitative characteristics of releases, whether they are supported and whether they're recommended.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think whatever decision process would probably need to be based on those two statuses as opposed to whether it's a major version upgrade or not. And so, right, because the major version upgrade could be recommended or might not be recommended because it's in alpha.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see what you're saying, that you wouldn't want to upgrade someone preemptively, but oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I was thinking that the maintainer wouldn't mark something as the preferred version until it was ready. But
yeah, but we're also dealing with this
before it's recommended, but not recommended.
And we're also dealing with a situation where we've got more than one maintainer involved, right? So it could be that like the maintainer of entity tokens is like not recommended, and the maintainer of rules is like, I love this new entity tokens, we're going to depend on it. And now the problem is upstream from the solution, or vice versa, or something.
yeah. Well, I'm curious, Jen, in your testing. So we don't have any like update module. It doesn't have an interface for like updating individual modules, does it? It just has the
List of checkboxes.
list of checkboxes. I wonder if it would be, I don't know, when you get into like complicated dependencies, it gets really difficult. Like if two modules need to be updated at the same time.
Yeah.
But I wonder if like we could build something that is like um, a single module update page where it's like instead of like we have that download link, like might be nice if there was like an update link that took you to a page for updating just one individual module that could then ask you, additional details about which version you wanted to update to. That would be different than the bulk updater, which just updates everything. Um, and that could overcome a lot of the like, I have this problem with this one individual module that there could be a manual process for specifically choosing a version.
Yeah, I think that was sort of what I was envisioning too, where you go to run all your updates and it fails. But if there was a link on that page that's like, this failed because rules depends on entity token version 2, then there could be a link that's like investigate individual module, and you go to that page, and then on that page that could have like entity version now available entity version 2, do you want to update? Yes. And so there's sort of a manual process where you'd have to say like update to version 2. You can update to version 2 first, and then you can return to your like update everything page, and then it would continue. So I don't know what that feels like. Like I don't know what that process would feel like, but at least we would give people some interface that would allow them to like get the update they needed from within the installer
Yeah,
interface.
this could be entirely instead of the option to choose like, stay within majors or not. Our policy, we could switch that to like majors need to be done manually, and automatic really only means within the major version all the time.
Yeah, I think that might be easier.
Mhm.
Definitely would be a lot safer, or at least,
In
yeah.
this situation, shouldn't since rules relies on entity token and entity token has a major release, shouldn't rules then have a major release? I guess does rules require entity token?
Yeah.
So if entity token has a major release, shouldn't rules also have a major release so those are synced?
Not
Because one relies
necessarily.
on the other one?
Yeah, I mean, if rules didn't have anything change except for I want to use entity token, seems like bumping major
Also,
is
the
overkill for that.
the major version of rules tracks the major version of rules on Drupal.
Yeah.
So rules is currently on, I think, 2.0 or something, 2 point something. And you wouldn't want to increment our rules to 3 if the Drupal version is still 2.
Or if there was also a Drupal version that was 3 that's now completely out of sync from the backdrop version, that would be really confusing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why can't entity tokens go to 1.2 instead of, wait.
Yeah, I mean, I
1.5?
think there's lots of possible ways that this could have gone and not happened, but I'm kind of glad that it did happen this way because it sort of showed us this potential problem that we could get into in the future. And I think, we're going to have a contrib world full of lots of different people that are going to have their own decisions for when their project is going to need to change versions. And because we're going to have dependencies and Backdrop is its own dependency manager, we're going to run into this eventually. So yeah, you're right. We could have bumped the rules version or not bumped the entity token version and avoided this, but I think we would have hit this problem down the road at some point. So it's good to think about it now.
Yeah. I kind of like this mentality. If we can make clear what the consequences are of major versions, including things like automatic updates, would incentivize people to stay within a major version for longer. If a major version required manual intervention on their user's part, then that might encourage more maintainers to have longer release cycles, just like Core does, which would have a side benefit for our end users if they could hold on to that, deprecated code or hold off on API breaks for as long as possible. Then that in a way, like encourages our core philosophy onto the contrib maintainers if there's benefits to staying within a major version for a long time, and kind of downsides, honestly, to switching major versions. But that's yeah, Wilbur, I don't really know why there was 2.x, you know, what caused that change, but it probably was some API that no longer functions the same as before. Okay. Let's see. Tim also raised a little comment in our chat here saying that automatic updates is moving up in popularity in the survey, which is forum.backdropcms.org/feature-requests, I think it is. I think I actually added a redirect from /survey as well to that URL. Automatic updates is now number 2. Under add an icon font to core, which is really surprising. Okay.
Only by 1 vote. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a margin of error there.
Okay, let's see. So there's a documentation issue next. I'm not sure who wrote this one in here that
That was me. So this is a follow-up where a long time ago, when we first started using issue milestones, things that made the next bug fix release were like things that were almost ready and things that we thought were really important. And when we documented the milestone process, that like critical bug fix issue wasn't included in there. So I added that back. That's the last paragraph that says there's one exception to the above for bug fix releases. If a bug is deemed sufficiently critical that it needs to be fixed by the next bug fix release, then the milestone can be added before the issue has a pull request in a near ready state. And that was something that we had been doing for a long time. It wasn't documented, so I wrote it in here. But it occurs to me that we should also determine and document how we deem an issue sufficiently critical. Who needs to do that? Does that come from a core committer? Write that down. Security team? I don't know. And then once we figure out that process or that the decision-making criteria, I would like to apply that to the issue we just discovered. This is no longer quite as urgent as it was yesterday because we were figured out as for the people who are currently running rules in entity token today. But just as an exercise, I think it's good to be like, hey, is this a critical issue? And then that way we can use that in the future if we have something that I can think of. Recently, we had like a user interface break in a major version of Backdrop, and we wanted to make sure that that got fixed before the next bug fix release. So that would have gotten added to the milestone before we had a pull request. So just some process there, like when do we make that determination? How do we make it? And how does that milestone get added?
This is actually this issue that we were just looking at. It's kind of interesting because you added milestone candidate bug right away.
And the milestone.
Oh, you added the milestone
Yeah.
already. Well,
and then
we have the policy on a milestone candidate minor that has to be seconded. Should we do that for the bug?
Well, so this was a critical bug fix though, right? It went to the exception. And so that's what I think we need to figure out is how that happens.
Right, that's what I'm saying, that maybe the exception just follows the same rule, that somebody else has to agree that it's important enough to be moved into the current bug fix milestone.
So sufficiently critical is like any 2 people agree that it's critical. That seems like it could be a little easy to abuse.
Yeah, I mean,
Greg and I get in there together.
It's really easy to subvert that already for, for the minor things, but I don't think it's a bad, regulator just to, have to request somebody else do it.
Okay. I will add a subsection there for the one exception and have it, I'll maybe post it in Zulip for review to make sure that looks reasonable.
The minor milestone needs someone to add the label, and someone else to add the milestone, but it also requires either a pull request that's RTBC or an advocate. So that's like minor ones have that requirement. Bug fixes already have the requirement that someone needs to add the label and someone else needs to add the milestone, but there's nothing yet to indicate if it. Oh, it also needs to have like the pull request. So we need something else there because they both already have 2 people needing to do it.
Yeah, but the issue is like, how do you determine if it's sufficiently critical? That would bypass the requires a second person. And so we just now need to say, okay, 2 people need to agree that's sufficiently critical, and then it doesn't need a pull request.
Peter, it does. We do have a requirement for a bug fix release that it has a recent pull request in a near ready state.
Yeah.
So it's not. I don't know if I knew this. I thought it takes more than 2 people. Even if you have 2 people agreeing to it, if there's no pull request, it shouldn't be.
Well, can now. That's what we're adding. That's what we're
Well, but
talking
in a
about.
critical situation, right? We're critical.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it
I
sounds
think
almost
that
like it sounds almost like what we're saying is that the rules for bug fix and minor should be the same. That this exception here, that it can be moved into RTBC or moved into the milestone if there is a pull request that's RTBC.
If there's not a pull request.
Right. We're saying if there's not a pull request, but it needs to be seconded, which is the exact same as we have for minor releases right now. Right. Well, I guess
minor release
there
needs an
doesn't need,
advocate.
there doesn't need to be an advocate.
Yeah.
I see. Oh yeah,
We could restructure it where like it could be the same for both, and then say the exception is for minor releases need to have an advocate.
Yeah, I think that sounds better because it then both things would need to be seconded, and there would be an exception for both unless there was a pull request that was already nearly ready. And the only difference is that minor versions require an advocate, and bug fix ones, any 2 people agreeing can put stuff into the bug fix milestone.
Okay.
And don't let me steamroll that. I just, yeah, you tell me if that sounds good.
I think it's fine. I just want it to be clear so we can write it down.
Yeah. Does it
But
sound good to
our
everybody?
our minor release requirements don't say that you have to have. Maybe I'm confused. Don't say that you need to have a pull request, do they?
Right.
No.
And are we talking about change? So we're talking about changing that, so it's the same.
No, we're talking about changing the bug fix criteria so that it doesn't need a pull request.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a related question. If we have a RTBC label on a minor or on a bug fix, can it automatically go to the, or does it still need 2 people?
I don't think it matters. Like I think if an issue, and core committers correct me here, I think if an issue is tagged with RTBC, the core committers will see it regardless of whether it's in a milestone or not. They review the RTBC issues.
Yeah,
they don't necessarily look at milestones.
Yeah,
only.
that's correct. And I think I don't want it to be automatic because
Okay.
they often don't get put in at the first pass of being RTBC. They get marked needs work. And I don't think that we would then want to automatically remove things from the milestone after they got bumped back down.
Fair enough. Good.
Just as an aside, I love these little the styling that we have on these
Robert did that.
on these tags in the documentation site. That looks amazing.
It's great. Yeah.
Very cool.
And if you want to, and they're tokens, and if you want to know what tokens are available, there's a menu in the reports menu.
And this is a contrib module, so you can put it on any sites if you want it. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, are we done with that topic?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. BW Panda wanted to raise this issue about the admin bar items sometimes going off the screen. Here's a little GIF of it happening live where some of the menu items fly off the right side of the screen. But it looks like there's already a pull request that's been filed. that makes it so that when you get close to the edge of the screen like this, it just pops the menu out the opposite direction, which I do believe that this was the case at one point in Backdrop Core, and we may have suffered from a regression and not noticed it, because I'm pretty sure this was already supposed to be the behavior. I'd be curious to see how this works when it goes off to the right for the first time and then it hits the edge of the screen, and then the next time it needs to go backwards. Because after you get to so many levels, you might end up with like a zigzagging type effect where
So
it hits the
does-
edges of
it
the
does-
screen and then it needs to go backwards again.
It does go back on itself. So it's not I mean, my JavaScript and stuff isn't the best, but I think it's better than the current situation, which is where it's just not usable in that situation. Because there's another issue, which is where we're adding a new thing to the more tasks section, and it has a drop down, and it's basically unusable because it's always on the right hand side and you can't see the sub menus. So at least fixes that issue, and it fixes this one on smaller screens. But yeah, for multi-nested menus, then there is an issue where it just goes back on itself. I mean, it's still kind of usable, but I don't know how to fix it ideally, other than a whole reworking. But yeah.
Yeah, we have a bigger issue to switch out the entire admin bar to using smart menus, which is the same thing we use on the front end. But quite honestly, drop-down menus are really, they're always difficult. And so there hasn't been a whole lot of enthusiasm for doing the work there, because it's a lot of work, and the current admin bar is
Fine.
it's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
It's not
Exactly.
great, but it's fine. Yeah, I think this is a lot better, Peter. Thank you for working on this.
Do we have consensus that this is a major bug?
Ooh. Well, it has a pull request. We could sort of an in-year ready state anyway.
Well, it does need further testing and review and stuff. So that's what I
Yeah.
brought it up for, just to get people to see if they can test it, review the code, etc. Make sure I haven't done anything wrong or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're looking for a second, I will mark it RTBC, but
Mhm.
there you go. Ta-da.
Nate thinks it's critical.
I'm only doing this because I know Peter will work on it.
He's already worked on it. It looks fantastic. He needs reviews now. Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right. Next up is one that I added that has some interesting technical challenges. Eric Tupin filed this issue about configuration override not working in some situations. And I posted 3 examples here that I think demonstrate the problem most clearly. So if you do a config override in your settings.php file like this, so this changes the config, or this changes the mail system to a different class, like if you were going to send via SMTP or something like that. So if you have a config override and then you pull the config in a couple of different ways like this, config get system mail, and then you say default mail system, you will get the override. Or if you do it like this, where you do a config on the whole file, get a config object, and then do config get with the method, then you also get the override. But if you do a config get on the entire file, which returns an array, not an object or the value itself, then when you check the array for the list or for the value, it comes back as the original and not the overridden value. So the kind of complaint here is seems pretty valid that it's like regardless of which one you use, the override should always be returned. That's what I think would be most people's expectation. It's difficult for us to do technically, however, because we check for overrides inside of this like get method when we're looking for an individual key. And if we were to do it for the entire file, then if you pulled in an entire file, we'd have to check the entire file for overrides, like one key at a time, to see if any of the overrides had been made throughout the entire file. So there's also a little bit of an efficiency problem potentially that checking an entire file for overrides could be a little trickier than checking an individual key. The good news is that we're not actually doing this in very many places. There's only 7 places in all of core that we call config get on an entire file instead of asking for a particular key. Usually it's when loading a complex object like a layout, a custom block, a text format. And these are things that are less likely to be overridden via config overrides in settings.php anyway. But loading the mail system settings is just a weird situation where we're doing this for a setting for some reason. And so the immediate fix that Herb and I have discussed is like, well, why don't we just fix the immediate problem of making the mail system config read the settings correctly, the predictable way. And that will solve the immediate problem of the mail system not being overwritable. So yeah, so we still have some questions about like, how can we actually manage this? Oh, it looks like, oh, sorry, I haven't looked at this since apparently a couple of hours ago, where Herb apparently now has made a pull request. So maybe this whole thing will be a moot point because it's been fixed. I don't know. I'll have to take a look. Well, that's great. Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not sure if that actually is a good topic for discussion after all, because I thought that it might be interesting to talk about should we do it or not. But if Herb has already fixed it, then it seems like it's obvious that we should probably fix it. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, this is actually, sorry. He made a pull request to the mail system module.
So that's the short immediate fix that you were talking about.
Well, this is the immediate fix that I'm talking about, that in core, where we're currently calling config get, the one that doesn't do a config override, we just switch it to calling config instead. And then instead of treating it as an array, we use it as an object, and then the overrides start working.
Yeah. So in the instances where we are pulling the entire config file, is there a reason that was chosen over pulling it as an object? Like, or what is the reason? Is it because
I think in the cases and these, there's no good reason for why we did it here for mail
here,
system.
right?
Yeah, there's not really any good explanation, but it does make a lot of sense for loading layouts or custom blocks or text formats. I'll have to check out views are loaded, because I suspect they would be kind of similar, that you need to load the entire file for view.
Yeah.
I think that it happens most frequently when the entire config file needs to be pulled in, and then the entire config gets like passed into a constructor for like a more complex object, like a layout or a view. Because in those cases, the entire file is generally needed in order to construct the complex thing. But for settings, yeah, settings, it doesn't really make any difference one way or the other. It from most people's perspective, it probably is the difference about whether or not you want an object to work with or whether you want an array to work with, and it syntactically you could choose which one you wanted. But now this actually is making a difference between the object and the arrays. I mean, I guess there already is the difference, and somebody's just discovered it. Because one other solution that we have here is that instead of fixing this problem, we could just document the problem.
Yeah.
We also could deprecate loading an entire file via config get,
That's what I was thinking.
Because right
And I
now
was thinking
the second parameter is optional, and we could make that required.
required. And if you called it without the second parameter, it could do something like return false. And then that way we could catch anywhere in core that was doing it that way and change it to do it the other way.
Yeah, or throw a watchdog deprecated
Yeah, or both.
parameter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, since we only have these 7 instances, and there's some of them that do it in multiple places. That's how you end up with 7. But there's only 4 places, actually 4 modules that do this outside of tests, that load a config file directly like this. And so it wouldn't be very hard to update core to change that mechanism. What it would probably end up doing is make it more explicit when you want to load an entire file. Like you would probably call like get data or something like that. And get data, we could document as saying get data does not include overrides, that sort of thing, where we could, work into our documentation where overrides apply and where they don't, because right now it's not super clear what things work with overrides and which things don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's still, no matter what, there will always be things that don't get overrides, and we just need to decide where those are. Okay, well, the immediate problems, we're kind of working through them, just solving them in focused issues or focused pull requests. But yeah, this is an overall concept. Could be interesting to debate a little bit about. A side effect would be if we started doing this in certain places, or when we load an entire file, we might need to document things like a layout you can't alter via a settings.php override, but you could alter it via a hook layout load, and so maybe we need to start like clarifying that some of the more complex objects don't override like they do for settings, which I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's that much of a loss, in my opinion, but I think in the world of Drupal, I think you can config override even like deeply nested settings within a view. Even though I don't think that's a very good idea, it's still possible. Okay, sorry, I made everybody enter snooze fest there with the config override discussion. All right, that does it for the topics that we had raised before the beginning of the meeting. Let's see.
I have an idea.
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Darn it, I don't have the issue number. Peter's been working on an issue to customize date formats based on whether or not the users in Europe or the US, and Indigo Zella proposed an even further. Peter, do you want to talk about it? Do you have the issue number handy? Oh, I think I put it in it's in Zula.
I don't know the issue, but yeah, so the thing is that Backdrop ships with US formatted dates like month, day, year by default. And based on the Wikipedia research we've done, that's in the minority of everyone around the world that uses dates. Most people use day, month, year, or year, month, day. So we thought to ship Backdrop with either more formats to allow people to choose the ones they want. But then I had the idea to change the formats that are created by default when you install Backdrop based on what time zone you choose in the installer. So if you install Backdrop and you choose, say, like Sydney, Australia time zone, then the date formats created will be day, month, year based on the Australian standards. So what I've made a pull request that makes it so that by default in the config file, the date formats are day, month, year. And then if you install Backdrop with a time zone that's in a US place, then it changes it to month, day, year instead. I think I then also added a thing in there to change it for people in Europe because they prefer like dots instead of slashes or something like that. Anyway, that's my pull request, and there's an issue somewhere for that. And then Indigo Zella in Zulip has been tossing up the idea of going one step further and adding in I don't know if it's a third-party library or just some third-party code that uses some PHP library or extension to do it automatically as a really specific way of, if you're from this country, do this format. If you're from this country, do this format. And it sort of, I guess, automates it a bit. I'm not sure. So it's a sort of another step, and she was getting an idea if it's worth even making a pull request for that or not. It's unclear whether she got that feedback she wanted or not, but there's that suggestion too.
I think there are two questions that come to mind, one of which is just in general, this approach of customizing keeping the same date formats, but having them configured differently based on where you are. Is that a good idea first? And then if so, then the question is how fine-grained to make that, and whether this thing that Indigo Zella proposed, which would be much more fine-tuned, is possible or worth it. Peter, I didn't understand. She said it would require the INT plugin or something. And I wasn't sure, was that something that Backup would require, or was that something that would be required on the server?
I think people's server or in their installation of PHP, their like server setup would have to have PHP installed with this extension enabled, as far as I understand it, which I'm not sure if that's by default or not. I don't know if that's a default thing that's added to PHP or whether you have to do it manually.
I don't think Indigo Zella's created a ticket yet for this her suggestion. She just brought it up and was very eager to get some feedback on whether or not it was worth pursuing.
Yeah, I think that yeah, the per user different in formatting definitely should be a different issue. I'm in favor conceptually of this, like, you know, based on the time zone you select. Also change the date formats. It's not always the case that the person doing the installation or the one selecting the time zone is necessarily the same as where the site is going to be used, but it generally is, especially because the question at install time is like, what is the time zone, the default time zone for the entire site? So I think that that's a pretty good question or value to hinge all of the date formats upon. And I'm also totally in favor of doing this idea that we have universal formats, universal global formats by default, and then use the US as a specific, like if they're in the US, then do these particular things. I think that every time we have these kind of situations about there's something that is US centric within our software, we should work towards a solution that's more global. And I really like that this doesn't inconvenience the US users at the same time. Like US users, it'll be the same as before. And that's the the best of both worlds. Although I'm just going to stay out of this discussion where the Europeans are all arguing about what the standard format is. Because, yeah, it looks like there's a lot of options. Yeah,
Well,
I wonder
that's
if we're
what
going to start ending up with, like, if you're in Australia, you get this format, and if you're in Austria, then you get that format, you know? Like, it could end up becoming a lot more granular than we foresee initially.
I think that's what Indigo Zella is trying to solve. And the question would be that, you know, Peter suggested a contrib module, but I think Indigo Zella pointed out that this happens at install, so it can't be a contrib module. And if we did it in core, it would be a little more code change than what his proposal is. And also, I don't know about this INT requirement, if that would be a problem. You know, would we just check to see if that was available and do one thing if it wasn't, and then we would use this library if that was available, or how would that work?
Yeah, sometimes we've done that in the past where if there's an easy way of doing it that's provided by something that may or may not be there, we try to use the easy solution first, and then we have like a simplified manual fallback that's like, oh, if the plugin isn't available, then we support the American override potentially, and then but nothing else, that sort of thing.
Well, maybe that's enough to move the conversation forward.
Yeah, this is a very spirited discussion here. It's only been open. Oh, actually, it's been open for a while, but it really got rolling here in the past couple of days. In the last 10
Are
days,
you
there's
just
been like 60 comments.
you're just looking at the GitHub issue, right? Because there was also a spirited discussion in Zulip as well.
Yeah, 4645 is the issue I'm looking at. All right. Okay, well, that's all I've got for today. And looks like we're nearly at the top of the hour, so it's time to wrap up. Does anyone have any closing thoughts or anything they'd like to mention?
Let's mention the open force thing. We're in the final week. So just so everybody knows, open force is wrapping up. I forget the exact date here, but it was at the end of the month. So I'm pretty sure our next meeting will be in April, won't it? Or not? We have one more. Anyways, there are a couple of issues that need some feedback. There's a couple RTBC, and it would be good to get those if we can. Obviously, we may not always be able to, but if we could get them wrapped up by the end, these users are looking to get credit in their hackathon. We can try to. There've been. I've been pleased with the progress, and we've got one competitor, Rakish. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but a shout out to Rakish. Again, apologize if I got your name wrong, but he's done a whole number of issues. He also wrote a blog post that you mentioned us in. And he's, at least for the time being, been pretty enthused about background. That's been fun to see.
Excellent.
That's all.
Yeah, I'm very excited about those. Oh, one more call out then, also related to open force and some of our contributors from Southeastern Asia. I saw that there was now office hours that are happening kind of opposite global time zone wise. Wilbur, are you still, do you have a hand in the new additional office hours?
I don't, that's Tim. I'm still running the OTC, UTC 19 hours, and Tim's running the UTC 6 hours now.
Actually, they're UTC 5. I had to make an adjustment.
All right.
I have some colleagues in Bangladesh, and for the last 2 weeks, we have been having office hours and just working on basically kind of code scripting but we're inviting and encouraging other people to join us.
Yeah, wonderful news. I love to hear that, and I'm sure that that's helping with open force a lot as well, because you do have a lot of Indian and Pakistani contributors, I believe.
That was a huge motivator in us doing that, was to make it available.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, well, let's wrap up for today. Thank everybody for being here in these discussions, and thank you out there for watching and listening. And as always, keep up the great work. So talk to you all next week.